And blah, blah, blah.
Delightful to be here.
It is delightful, yeah.
Beautiful.
Thank you. And that's little John Rain. You're going to get up or you're going to get down? Quick. Make a decision.
Oh.
Make a decision.
Like my baby.
Okay, hello and welcome to the Better Reading Book Club. This evening, it's an all-female panel, as you can see. I've got Nicole Aberdeen on my left here. Nicole is the book writer for the Australian Financial Review magazine, and she's also a literary consultant. Welcome to Nicole. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Cheryl. Wonderful to be here.
And I'm going to hold your book actually.
Sure.
I've got Suzanne Leal here, author of The Teacher's Secret. It's actually a new release. It's only been out, for a month or so?
Since June.
Since June. It's doing very well. If you haven't read it, do yourself a favour and get a copy.
I agree. It's fantastic.
It's fantastic, isn't it? Well, thank you so much for joining us, Suzanne. So we've got an author and we've got a writer, book writer, and I'm Cheryl Arkle. Welcome to Better Reading Book Club. Now, tonight we are talking about, drum roll, Out of the Ice by Anne Turner. Now, Anne Turner is a filmmaker turned writer, and you might remember that her first book, her debut book, was The Lost Swimmer, and that was out maybe a year and a half ago, to really great critical acclaim. And Out of the Ice, which what we're talking about tonight, is her second book. Anne is a wonderful writer. She's Australian. She lives in Melbourne. I had lunch with her recently, and I'm sure she's watching, so hello, Anne. Now, let's get started. If you want to join in this conversation, we are live, straight down the barrel through Facebook live streaming, but you can join in the conversation by making comments or asking us questions. You just type them into the comments and we'll pick them up and we'll run with it. Okay, firstly, I'm going to start with you, Nicole. Out of the Ice, Anne Turner. What did you think?
I thought that there was a lot about it to love. It's a very gripping, suspense-filled read. It makes you want to keep reading. You certainly want to get to the end to find out what happens. I had some issues with some of the characters. I wasn't absolutely wild about Laura, the main character. Perhaps we can talk about that a little bit later. The story itself I thought was a very important one. A lot of us have a fascination with Antarctica, and I loved the way that it was portrayed.
Yeah.
Almost, I felt that it was a character in the novel. And it was mysterious, it was frightening, it was beautiful, it was remote, and I felt that it actually was one of the main parts in the book. So, nice twist in the end. And
a shocking twist in the end.
Yeah.
Shocking.
Yeah, a very, I always like a twist in the end, so that was a big plus. And, all in all, a good read.
Okay, now firstly I'm going to ask you, do you want to give us just a little synopsis? Tell some of our viewers what the book is about?
Yeah, sure. So Out of the Ice centres on Laura, just get her last name, Alvarado, who is the main character. She's a scientist. She's been given a job to go to Antarctica, and it's what happens to her there. She's an interesting character. She's had a sad life.
How old was Laura? I thought she was
39. She's 39.
Late
She's
30s. Yeah, I thought that.
So she's had 2 marriages behind her. She's this doesn't spoil anything anyway, but it doesn't matter. Spoilers are fine.
Yeah.
She lost a child. A child was stillborn, and she seems very much still immersed in that grief. She's a good friend, and the other characters are some of her friends, Kate and Georgia, and the story revolves around her work on the Antarctic station, a fictional station, an Australian part, and also her work in an old deserted whaling station, which is called Friedrichshafen. And what happens to her? It's part a love story, part mystery, part suspense, and part what happens when you can't let go of the past.
Yeah, that's really, that was it, didn't it? That very good summary, thank you. Okay, so shall we start? I've got a few questions here that we've got. They're more like discussion points because we are in a book club. If you have any comments for us or any questions, please send them through. Now, I'll start with my first one. Antarctica is a unique setting for the novel. How does the location add to the suspense? And how crucial is the setting to the story? What place does Antarctica hold in our collective imagination? Do you know, always when I'm reading a book that is set in, well, if it's hot, if it's set in summer, then I'm hot when I'm reading it. And if it's set in the Antarctica, then I'm cold. I found myself just moving my blanket up all the time. Did you find that?
Yes. The atmosphere is created very strongly. As I say, I felt like Antarctica was almost the main part in the book. I felt the same. I was also wrapping up as I was reading it. And I agree it's unique, and the book wouldn't be the same without it. The setting is absolutely essential to the story.
I think what's really important about the setting is, for a good suspense film where the book, but again, given that Anne Turner is a filmmaker, that probably was a slip of the tongue, but not completely, because I think the book itself is very filmic.
Yeah.
You can see almost the directions as to how a film could be made out of this book. I think it's good to have somewhere very remote. You're looking at suspense, you're looking at a thriller, you're looking at a single woman who may be alone. How are you going to find a setting that allows that to happen? Antarctica's pretty good. Even better is having a deserted ghost town where she's the only one allowed.
Wasn't that interesting, the whaling station? I thought that was
Really good,
very descriptive, beautifully written.
Yes.
I really loved it. I could feel myself walking through that town.
And I could see it.
Oh yeah,
The
absolutely.
vivid colours. I absolutely love the description of the buildings all being such different vivid colours, so that they would really stand out from the snow. That created a very strong visual image, didn't it?
And it really, for me, I've never been to that part of the world, but it really, really got me going. I thought, I really want to go, and I'd love to go to the Antarctic, but also there must be, I mean, I know that was fictional, that was a fictional area, but there must be similar communities, like right around the region, that have been deserted or isolated, or, whaling's not happening anymore, and that's where they are. What were the two ladies in Nantucket? Was it when she came back?
Nancy and Helen.
Nancy
Yes.
and Helen. I
Yes.
loved how that was
Yes.
their home, and the way that they talked about it, and it was where they grew up. And to me, it added more life to the whaling station, their view of it.
I agree, and I think it was also really interesting. It was a counterpoint to Laura's own position. She was very much anti-whaling, and you knew that from the word go, and don't have a problem with that at all. But it was interesting to see these older women, and whaling had been part of their family's lifeblood, and they had a different perspective of it, and they were very respectful. In particular was Helen, who was very respectful of what her grandparents had done, and very proud of what they'd done.
Now, we're here talking about, you're at Better Reading Book Club, we're talking about Out of the Ice by Anne Turner. I'm with Nicole Aberdeen and Suzanne Leal. Now, let's get on to our next discussion point. Laura has a troubled past. She certainly does. Her description of her mother earlier on was, I thought, very funny. There's a little bit of humour in that.
Can we come back to that?
We can come back to that. Do you think that this has played a part in her strong feelings towards Antarctica and its wildlife? How has it affected her view of the world? Is Laura an unreliable narrator? Okay, let's start with, yes, she does have a troubled past. So was it her mother? Who was Spanish? Her mother. Yeah. And she changed her surname.
Took
That's
the mother's
right.
surname.
Yeah. And she really had I guess, a yearning for her father, but in a sense it was the father she never knew. So she yearned for him, but she actually didn't know him, did she?
Yeah. I had a bit of a problem with Laura's relationship with her mother. I felt that was... it was obviously portrayed as being a very difficult relationship, but I didn't quite understand why. It seemed like Laura, at the beginning, blamed her mother for the father leaving the marriage, but
yes, she did,
we weren't really told why that was the mother's fault. And then, possibly because I'm a mother myself, I felt very sorry for the mother through the course of the book. The mother would make calls or would try to contact her daughter, and we found out at the end why, and there was a very important reason why she was trying to contact her daughter. And Laura's comments about her mother were very negative all the way through, and I didn't really understand why that was. We hadn't seen or had an explanation of why the relationship was troubled in that way.
But I think, Nicole, I think if you were to ask many people why they have a troubled relationship with their mother, they couldn't describe why. I think that's often that there's a friction. Last month on Book Club, we talked about All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr, and as you know, it's about a young child, and she's brought up by her father. And I remember thinking that child and the relationship around her, with her father was all about discovery, the new, learning. You know, when you, very often in literature, and maybe very often in life, and I don't know this in life, but in literature, if there's a single father with a child, it is more about learning, discovery, fun. But if it's in literature and it's a single child with a mother, it's about survival, it's about poverty, it's about, you know, it's a completely different relationship. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if that's true in life. I don't know if that's true, but it's interesting, isn't it? And I thought there was a bit of that in here as well.
And I do think it's true. Having been a single mum myself, I think there's something sexy about being a single dad.
Yeah.
And there's not very much that's sexy about being a single mum.
That's right. And even in literature, if you're a single dad, you're making model houses for your child.
Yes.
And if you're a single mum, you're there over the stove. Yeah, and you're working 2 jobs and you're cooking and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, that was something. But I think, no, I kind of got the relationship with her mother, because I thought very often all the people that I know that have troubled relationships with their mother, they can't tell you why.
And you know, for God's sake, she's gone to the other end of the world. She's gone to Antarctica to escape everything. She's escaping the grief from the marriages.
Yes.
She's escaping the grief from the lost child. And her mother's following her everywhere.
Yeah.
I think I just felt I would have liked more of a backstory.
Yeah,
I would have liked just a little bit of information about that relationship to give me an idea as to why she felt the way she did.
Yeah, because it was abrupt when I think the father left, and you thought, oh, more as to why that happened. And really, I wondered, why did we even know? We needed to know why until we knew why. Yes. But anyway, now I think we've got a comment from one of our readers.
Yeah, Bianca would like to know if it was coincidental for our heroine to get accommodation in place where the owner was best friends with the daughter granddaughter of the whalers.
It was a small town. You don't, obviously Bianca doesn't think it's believable. Maybe not. I kind of bought that because I thought it's a small place
and it's a whaling town.
It's a whaling town, and everybody knows everybody. I don't know, but obviously Bianca, you didn't buy that. Do you know? I don't know about you, but I am one of these people. If I'm reading a book, I am immersed in the book. If I'm watching the film, I'm immersed in the film. Some people say to me, they see a movie and they see the boom, or they see this, or they see that, or they see the continuity go wrong. Never. No. I don't see any of that.
I don't see any of that either.
Because it's about the story. But anyway.
And isn't there a contract as well between the reader and the writer? And for the reader says, let me take you, and the writer says, I'm going to try and take you.
Yeah.
And that's how the reading continues, because you think, okay, maybe that's a little bit of a coincidence. Am I going to let you have it? Yeah. And I think the relationship between Helen and Nancy is so lovely. I thought, yeah, you can have that.
Yeah,
that's okay.
And the setting was lovely.
The setting was beautiful.
And the cookies
and I love
were
the food.
lovely.
I could smell those cookies.
I could smell it.
And then the pancakes with cranberries. I could just taste those.
It was almost like travelling.
Yeah,
wasn't
it was.
It was.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I quite like that. I was convinced, but I understand why people weren't. Okay, let me read. Did you want to make a comment about the destruction of family, or were you wanting to make a comment about?
I thought it was interesting the way that it portrayed family relationships. So there was that relationship. Poor Laura came from a broken home, and that was obviously very distressing. And then what must have been infinitely more distressing was that she ended up having 2 broken marriages herself, including, as Suzanne has said, the loss of a child. So that was obviously her childhood was fractured in that way. And it was almost a bit as if by going to Antarctica, she was trying to find another family there. On that note, something I found it a little bit annoying, but I guess I can see it why it was done that way, was that she immediately, upon meeting Travis, within nanoseconds of meeting him, was saying, oh, this will be my little brother, I'm going to treat him like my little brother. And I didn't really understand why she'd come to that view so quickly. I thought that was a little bit patronising. Anyway, spoiler alert, what ends up developing, the relationship that develops between Travis and Laura, is then very interesting. But I did have this sense that Laura, having come from a broken family and then having had 2 broken marriages herself, was perhaps looking to create a family in Antarctica, and that ties in with something else about the relationship between the women that I think maybe we were going to talk about.
But also too, getting back to, and I think Anne Turner made this comment in the book somewhere, that people that go and work in remote areas and leave their families and their partners and everything else, they're a certain type of people, I think. I mean,
brave.
They're brave. They're definitely brave, but there are also loners.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of environment suits them. So the fact that she's got a fractured relationship with her family made sense to me. That's why
Yes.
she's there,
Yes,
isn't it?
I agree.
I think from a plot perspective as well, and just setting up, it was hard for us to know who to trust, but really it was hard to know which men to trust. So you had a bit of a safety net in that we assumed that we could trust the best friend Kate, we assumed we could trust the
I'm
police
just not sure
officer,
about why
Georgia.
Kate was there. I don't know what value Kate added to my
She was an ally.
enjoyment of the book.
I'm sorry. She was an ally to start with, I suppose. She was there because she was a friend of Laura's. So before Georgia arrived, it meant that Laura had
I love
someone
Georgia. I love Georgia.
there. I love Georgia too.
Yeah, I love Georgia.
Love Georgia.
Yeah.
And maybe it's safety. I mean, it's a book that's quite
Yeah.
suspenseful. It's a bit nerve-wracking because the men are all so odd, and maybe Kate provides some safety in what would otherwise be a pretty dismal setting. Maybe the reader needed a bit of reprieve,
Right,
and
okay.
Kate provides that.
And it was such a hostile environment from as soon as Laura arrived. The men that she was meeting were being introduced to were rude to her right from the very first dinner when she was trying to be friendly and get
Yes.
to know people. So she was very isolated, and I think, yes, I agree with Suzanne that Kate was there as a bit of a foil, a bit of a comfort, so she had somebody there that was,
fair
had
enough.
her back, I guess.
And also, she was the one that went to Friedrichshafen
Yes.
and so unless you're going to have a whole lot of internal monologue,
Yeah.
then you need someone for the conversation. Otherwise,
have,
there
yeah.
wouldn't have been someone who was allowed to have the conversation because everybody else, as I understand it, was prohibited from going to
Right.
Friedrichshafen.
Okay, so we're Better Reading Book Club. We're here tonight with Nicole Aberdeen, Suzanne Leal, I'm Cheryl Arkle, and we're talking about Out of the Ice by Anne Turner. We've got a comment from another reader.
Yes, Sue agrees 100% that Laura seemed to form a relationship with Travis very quickly. Some of the characters did seem superfluous. Did you think that?
Yeah, well, I thought Kate was. But I understand what you're saying, maybe that puts it in a storytelling context. I understand why she was there. But she wasn't an appealing character to me, not like Georgia, who I absolutely loved.
I thought Rutger was a bit superfluous as well.
Yeah.
We were waiting for him to arrive. We were really interested
Yes.
about him.
Yes.
And then he actually played a very minor role.
Yeah.
I don't know that we needed him.
No. It was
It's an
really
interesting
funny.
question.
Do you know what I thought was very passive-aggressive? Was when people were only introducing themselves by first name. I'd never seen
Yes,
that as a
yes,
passive-aggressive
yes.
act until I read it. And I wondered whether Anne had experienced that in her career, because I don't think I've ever come across that. That would make me feel very uncomfortable.
There's a book by Marie Darrieussecq, French author, and she called Men, her most recent one, and she has a scene of all these film people in Los Angeles, and they're all just known by first names.
Wow.
So maybe it's something like that where you've got to be in the know,
Yeah.
and because
It's really aggressive. It's bullying in a sense. Isn't
But it
it?
also means you can't Google them, right?
No, that's right.
So you can't search the history.
Yeah, you can't
You meet
find
someone
out.
and you can't find out anything more about them.
That's right. Now, if you've got any comments or any questions, please just type them into Facebook comments. But meanwhile, I've got some comments that people made earlier. So I'm going to go through some of these, and please feel free to interrupt, ladies. Hazel, as a writer who has been on an official Antarctic expedition, I enjoyed this novel. Very descriptive. Yeah.
And that's the sort of compliments you want from a reader. I know for my book, The Teacher's Secret, when teachers like the book, you've got it right.
Yeah.
So if someone like Hazel, who actually knows the Antarctic and has been on an expedition, thinks that Anne Turner has got it right, then that's a big tick for Anne's research, I think.
Absolutely. Joanne, I read this recently. YouTubed penguins for hours after.
I did the same thing. I YouTubed the Adelie penguins as well.
Yeah.
Because I hadn't heard of an Adelie penguin. I didn't know if that was different from an ordinary penguin. And I loved the way, a few times, she described the way they walked with a Charlie Chaplin-like walk.
Yes.
And then when Kate, who was the penguin lover, was with them, Kate started to walk with a Charlie Chaplin-like walk as well. So I also Googled Adelie penguins because I wanted to see if they did walk with a Charlie Chaplin-like walk.
Yeah. The animals were beautiful and sad at the same time. Anyway, we'll get to that. Jan, just read it and loved it. I didn't think it was too far-fetched.
Right.
Dana, it was a page-turner and loved it. Rachel, I really enjoyed this book. Fantastic read. Gay, it was a very descriptive book. And Heidi, thoroughly enjoying the book. But I've got some mixed ones which I'll read. From Narissa, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't riveting either. Amber, I have read it, enjoyed the storyline, but did feel it was written basically, so it was really quick and easy to read. Yep. Michelle, loved the description of Antarctica, would have preferred it to have stuck to that. Yeah, I thought I think the descriptions, particularly once she got off the Antarctica, I thought were very spot on for me.
I agree with that. I agree with that. Much as I loved the descriptions of Antarctica, for me, this was a book that was a bit of a slow burn for me. I thought that it gathered momentum. And for me, once we got to Nantucket and then to Venice, I thought it really picked up a lot of speed there. Venice, and I liked it more and more as it went on.
Venice, she did well.
She did really well.
She made Venice dirty and grotty and murky.
Yeah.
It wasn't the beautiful Venice. In a way, she made the underworld of Venice reflect almost the tunnels in Antarctica.
Yes.
She was showing us the...
You're right, the canals and the dead ends.
There were the tourists who were on the surface, in the gondolas, on the bridges, and then she's bringing us into the murky depths of the water and the isolated parts.
Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that.
All right, now let me read another one of our comments that I've got here, a discussion point. Discuss how the book looks at human progress, from the whalers to the scientists to the migrants and refugees in search for a better life. How vulnerable are children in this? Well, I think this question is very, very timely in Australia particularly, and the vulnerability of children and the abuse of children. Do you want to start, Suzanne? I think that's been an area of your work, hasn't it?
Yeah, so I'm a member of the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal, and part of my work is in child protection, in who should and shouldn't be working with children. I suppose what I took from this book and vulnerability of children is that kids need an advocate. Kids always need someone there who are looking out for them, because not all adults can be trusted. And I think the sadness of Santo's story, the little boy, is that he had lost that advocate. And when children are cut adrift and left alone, the chances for danger are great.
I agree. Children are completely vulnerable in this book, and as you'll find out as you weave your way towards the end, but a point at one stage they talk about children as economic refugees, and these are children who are not fleeing because they're persecuted in their homeland, but whose parents actually expelled them from the country to send them out to make money working in other countries, and that
sold them in a sense.
Effectively sold them, and at one point that's described as all the people in the village might contribute to the cost of this child going across, and then whatever the child earned would be shared amongst all of those that had contributed. So I think one of the characters says it's almost like turning children into stock. And we see that the consequences of that are incredibly sinister in this book, the way that it plays out.
I think she also does well the description of boys, despite being teenagers, early or slightly later teenagers, are still very young children. So Santo, I think, is 12 or 13, and what I really liked about it is how small he really was. And I think we forget sometimes when boys, particularly as they grow quickly and lanky, when they're 12 and 13, they're still young. And I think
but you're right, well. You know, that whole thing, talking about children need advocates. I mean, we're looking at children in detention just recently. You know, children being abused by adults, by carers, by people that are meant to be looking after them. I mean, it just seems to be a human trait. I mean, when is it going to stop? You know, years ago you used to think this wouldn't happen now, but it's happening right here in this country.
I think it's shocking with the recent revelations as to the Dondale detention centre.
Terrifying.
That
it is
you're
terrifying.
Assuming that children are placed into safety, that detention has an element of rehabilitation with it, and to see that that's been apparently completely betrayed is, I think, what's most shocking about this, because these aren't kids who have been taken by criminals or are in public view, but these are kids who are supposed to have been protected by the government and
given refuge,
and something's gone wrong.
So,
Absolutely, I agree, and that does come through as a very strong theme in the book as we get towards the end and we find out that children have been used for illegal human experimentation of drugs. And I think one of the questions that we were talking about before is the ethics of that, whether it's ever appropriate to, you know, whether the ends justified the means. In this case, they were looking for a solution for a vaccine to a pandemic that might have wiped out half of the world's population, but does that justify you in using children who've been effectively sold?
No consent.
No consent.
Well, exactly. Well, once you've got no consent, then you've got no justification.
Exactly. Now, I think we've got some more comments. Let me reintroduce ourselves for those that might have just tuned in. Nicole Aberdeen, Suzanne Leal, Cheryl Arkle. We're here at Better Reading Book Club and we're talking about Anne Turner, Out of the Ice. If you have any comments and questions, please type them into your Facebook comments and we'll call them out. We'll discuss them. Have we got anything else, Lizzie?
Anne liked that the girls looked out for each other. Did you?
Yeah, I thought there was real camaraderie between the women.
I think it's a woman's book.
Yes.
I think it's a real book for women, for friendship. I thought of my friends when I thought of Laura and Kate. I thought of my friends when I thought of Nancy and Helen, and I thought, I hope that my long-standing friendships stand the test of time.
Yeah,
I agree. I think that was a very strong theme in the book, the friendships of the women, the three of them, Georgia and Kate and Laura, in Antarctica, in a particularly male-dominated environment. And I think that working in an environment like that, I used to be a barrister and worked in a very male-dominated environment, and when you work in that sort of environment, your friendships with women who are in the same environment are particularly close.
Yes.
And I think that did come through very closely. I also love the relationship between Nancy and Helen, and like you, I certainly thought that dear friends that I have now, I hope that we'll be like that in 20, 30 years' time.
Oh, absolutely. Female friendships are quite strong, and she gets that. It's spot on. Have we got another comment?
Well, some people find that element, the paedophile ring, is cliched or a disappointment. Did anyone think that? They were disappointed that it went that way and they wanted it to go another way?
I don't know. I mean, I wish that pedophilia didn't exist, and I'm disappointed in that. But it made sense to me in the context of the story that these people were funneling, and it's a bit like the royal commissions that we're having now. All of these, the abuse of children has a knock-on effect. It starts somewhere, and then the abuse seems to. Well, you probably know this better than I do. But once a group of children, it seems, that are being abused, everybody seems to, come in on the abuse because they've lost their voice.
I thought she almost didn't need it. I thought the
there you
virus, the pandemic, the idea of taking kids to experiment on them was probably enough.
I'm inclined to agree with that.
Oh, there you go.
That was so interesting, and it presented this whole moral dilemma. And then to find out who the people were that were actually, I won't name them, but who the people were that were really performing that experimentation. I agree that the pedophilia was almost like an additional layer that you possibly didn't need, though it did raise interesting issues about those that were doing the human experiments who said that they didn't know that the abuse was taking place. And then she raises a really interesting issue and has a discussion about when you're complicit, if you turn a blind eye to something you don't want to know, does that mean that you're just as guilty as if you did know? And I felt that raised an interesting issue.
That's true. And maybe that was enough to make it valid.
Justify having that there.
But I think it does make sense. It makes sense to me because it seems that with all these stories that you read about and all these atrocities that you read about with child abuse, they're often very layered. It's not just one thing, it's just a layering. Because, as I said earlier, those people just lose their rights completely.
So vulnerable in all senses.
Yeah, I guess.
What Bianca says is she didn't quite buy that so many on the research station didn't know about the kids. It was too difficult to hide.
Although the island was a little further off. Yeah, maybe I thought that when I was reading it, but because of her description of where they were and the tunnels and swimming through, I thought, well, I haven't been to the Antarctic and it kind of probably can happen. I don't know. What did you ladies think?
I've got such a poor sense of direction. I just had to really focus on how you were getting down. I was thinking, are they going to be ice tunnels? And I thought, okay, great, we've got wood. And I was trying to imagine how far down. I'm not an engineer, so I was trying to work out, okay, how do you get the electricity sorted? I was fascinated in the world that she'd created, and I suppose that took me along.
Yes.
And I think early in the book she talks about the main structure at the Alliance Station, and when she first meets Travis and he's talking to her about that, and she sees that there are floors that go underground, and he says, well, we're only allowed as far as the first floor underground. Anything below that we are prohibited from going into. So I thought that maybe the tunnels connected to that lower level, and I don't know, I'm with you, Suzanne, I've also got a very bad sense of direction, so perhaps I didn't.
But you've read the book twice, and I think it probably merits a second reading because you catch those details as you go around.
All right, any more comments? No more comments. Well, I think that's it from us. So that was a discussion, a very lively discussion about Anne Turner, Out of the Ice. She's also written The Lost Swimmer, which I highly recommend. Great Australian filmmaker turned Australian writer, and congratulations, Anne Turner. Now that's young George over there, just scratching the lounge. Now listen, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm hoping you're enjoying Better Reading Book Club. Now, next book club, I know we've been talking about it being the last Wednesday of every month, but I'm actually away. I'm taking some leave. So we're resuming Wednesday the 7th of September is next book club. So don't forget to tune in, and we're going to be talking about about March by Geraldine Brooks. Now, we wanted to focus on a classic. We decided that we would go for something Australian. She is Australian. I'm not sure if she lives here anymore. She's a Pulitzer Prize winner. I think she might also be a Booker Prize winner. But either way, she's a great writer. I know many of you like her and know her. I remember, what was the first book? 9 Parts of Desire?
Oh, and there was Book of Wonders as well. Was that?
And Book of Wonders.
Yes.
Well, we're going to be discussing March, and we're going to be doing that the 7th of September, just to confuse you.
Year of Wonders.
Yes.
We're going to be doing that on the 7th of September, so please join us. Thank you tonight. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your questions. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you next time. Thank you, ladies. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you for
Nicole.
including it.